Okay, Jolana got in touch for a critique on this typeface, which is for like a video game set in the future. It's obviously got this kind of interesting stencil motif going on. So there's some alphabets and paragraphs. Say overall, pretty decent proof, you know? Gives you what you need without getting to be too much. This is kind of interesting. Like that. Cool. Okay. So we see basically what's going on here. And I think, most of the drawings look really good. So it seems like Jolana has some experience here. The main thing I would say is that there are a lot of characters that look super normal and weird. Normal, weird, normal, normal, and then weird, normal. So you kind of get the idea. What I'm trying to say here is that there are some words that you're going to type out. First of all, if you're going to say cafe in all caps, that's going to look super normal. But if you're going to say something maybe mostly in the lowercase, let's just go down and find an example of something. Yeah, gondola. That's going to look much more abstract. So it feels essentially like there's kind of two typeface ideas going on in here. And I'm always going to push for a singular idea in every typeface. You could think about this as a family that had two styles, and one was kind of normal, and one did this kind of more stencil treatment thing. That would also be viable. And there's also this kind of like bluntness or like brutalist kind of thing going on too, where the contrast seems a little bit more heavy-handed here, which I really like in a typeface that's meant to be more graphic. Is just to say like, let's just make it really low contrast instead of saying, oh, let's do all these perfect things to make it optically amazing and so that it works really like a book typeface. I say let's make it a little bit clunkier, because we're trying to make an impact here with this thing. I think I like how the stencil treatments are emphasizing the horizontal. This is a, a fairly successful thing, I think, but wouldn't you like just want to cut it there too? Like if we're gonna do stencils, to me that's like an instant logo kind of glyph, It's just like very, very graphic and very much kind of works. I would look for a little bit more logic in how we're treating stencils, kind of where they show up. And Jolana is already doing a great job of that, but I wonder if we could find some way of relating maybe the H to the end, if we could synchronize those a little bit. Maybe that's all that needs to happen to make an H, because then that would be kind of borrowing a little bit of that idea from the A. There's also this omitted left side of the crossbar of T, which I think is cool. That works well, but I'm also wondering if there's another stencil opportunity. And yeah, I'm also going to reiterate this point of getting a little bit more mass on those horizontals. I'm usually looking for some sort of right alignment in T. There's different ways of approaching that, but whatever. We also have a little bit of like a flare happening there, which seems like another idea. So I would actually emphasize the stencil thing more and just minimize the flare so it's not really showing up. That's like an optical thing that comes up sometimes when you're not even really trying to make it flare. It just kind of looks like it is when you're doing a sheared or vertical terminal like that. A little bit more mass there, I think. The S is one that looks very well drawn, very normal too. So I wonder if, like, I would just try and draw the top and bottom of it first and then see if there is a way of connecting them with some sort of a spine. There's a couple of references that I think would be great to look at. One is the typeface Stop by Aldo Novares. And one is the typeface Mater Tectura, Everything by Otmar Mater. Tectura, something like that. It's the Reebok font, Trapper Keeper font. And finally, Orientation from Sandrine Nude, who is one of my favorite type designers ever. Let's come into the caps a little bit more because I think we need to figure out some more stencil treatments in there. First of all, this idea of just drawing with white on top of a proof is always going to be a fast way of coming up with solutions because it's so much faster to start with something than nothing. You know that already. You know, the daunting nature of the blank page and all that. But then there's also this idea of like not letting anything go to waste. Like you have a lot of really great skeletons to build off. So let's not try and reinvent the wheel necessarily. Let's just try and use what we have to kind of improve on it. So if we're looking at something like a W, we want to do a stencil version of it. I think it's good to consider what the most traditional W's will look like. Here's a shitty drawing of where contrast might fall. So what we see is an emphasis on the downstroke there, right? Similar to that, I would want to then emphasize the downstroke, right? Because we're just trying to do the boring thing most of the time. You know, this is such a strong treatment already that I think just doing the boring thing is probably a nice idea. So if we let those downstrokes carry all the way through, maybe that's going to be the way that we can lean on tradition a little bit more. That's a pretty interesting W to me. Same thing would then work exactly on the V, and then on the A it's reversed, right? Because now we have like a mountain instead of a valley. So that sort of thing. If we're trying to come up with a method of figuring out whether we stencil out the left side of that or the right side, let's just see how that would echo through the design system. So if we were to do the left side, we could do it there, we could do it on B, we could do it on E and F and P and R and H, of course. Maybe a couple others. Let's not worry about that for right now. If we were going to stencil out the right side of the crossbar of A, we could do it here. Can't really do it so much right there. Can't do it on E and F. Can't really do it on R. We could do it on H. But for that reason, like, let's just do the easy thing that echoes through everything so that we can kind of more quickly build a logical system. Like, let's set up some rules that are big and sweeping and powerful and graphic and all that, but also just like rules that are easier to follow, if that makes any sense to you. Hopefully it does. R would be another one where they're like, that's a very simple R. It's like, I think it has a lot of graphic power. Let's write that down. Graphic power. it's something I think about all the time, but don't really articulate in those words too much. Yeah, okay. And then another idea is to like even emphasize the horizontal even more, to be like super blunt about it. Maybe these things get just like a hair more flat. This is kind of like what that typeface stop does. I love talking about stop, and no one loves stop more than Antonio Cavadoni, who is one of the best dudes ever, and a comrade of mine in the interest of guitars and guitar pedals. Okay, yeah, just coming through the rest of this, and I know what you're thinking, which is probably something like, you know, this is getting completely out of hand, James. I just wanted stencils a couple of places. I didn't want them everywhere. In that case, I would say, all right, cool, but just be wary of this. Weary? I don't know. I always get those words confused. But this cafe problem. And you have this like level of abstraction problem, which is kind of the root of a lot of issues I see with student typefaces. Level of abstraction, where some letters will be super, super abstract, and then some will be super, super normal. Like, look around here. These are all very, very normal kinds of things. The punctuation, etc. Maybe there's a way just to make round shapes stenciled out. So instead of having a circle or something, we would have a shape like that. Like, I really dig a motif like that, even though it is heavy-handed, but it's just like, this is what rounds do. This is how rounds are going to exist in this system. So anytime there's a round shape, which there often are, the top left will have a stencil break and the bottom right will as well. In any case, whatever you decide to do, I think the O's in this percent symbol, or per thousand as it were, could get a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more diagonal nature in that slash. I have a tendency to draw my math symbols a little bit too small, and I think these also might just be a little bit small, but I would have to kind of see them in context. Finally, in the question mark, yeah, there's got to be a way to get some sort of a bridge in there. And maybe I don't want to kill your vibe here, but maybe toning that question mark down, because it just seems like another idea, right? The really emphasized question mark. Like, what is that? We should talk a little bit about the asterisk. First of all, an asterisk could have 5 points. It could even have 6. Very common. To have 8, it's like, what are you trying to prove here? You know? I don't think you need to go for all 8 spokes of the asterisk, because that makes the center, where everything overlaps, really, really unnecessarily heavy. Let's just come in quickly to some more of these caps and think about how maybe that would be a kind of interesting way, because the typical or more obvious answer for a stencil K, there'd be 2 of them in my opinion. One is to just break the capital I apart from the less than symbol, and the other one would be more kind of grotesque-y, I guess, would be to make this like 3-stroke version of K. But I kind of like this idea of not doing the most obvious things, and instead having 3 strokes, but none of them really touch each other. Maybe something like that. We know that we're going to do the left side of the crossbar, right? I guess you also have this idea of emphasizing the horizontal, so maybe it's also that. I don't know. That might be a tomato one in my opinion. But on N, I would definitely emphasize the diagonal. Like I think that's kind of the important part about N, so that would be what I wanted to preserve. Kind of same thing on M. We just look for the parts that are typically thick in an M and go all in on those. Now I'm wondering about doing something like this, and I don't think it's super necessary. I just think it could be kind of cool, kind of like another level of emphasizing or going all in on your ideas, and or idea singular, I should say, and just really emphasizing all of these breaks, because you're like, this is what my typeface does. Look at it. I do the same thing everywhere. Absolutely everywhere, to the point where it's nearly exhausting. So yeah, that's kind of why I think it would be a cool idea to maybe have your standard style and your stencil style and be able to switch them out as you see fit. I don't think we get to let these punctuation off the hook. I think you could treat those in a fun way as well. And the comma, yeah, it's just a comma, but I think the comma is actually pretty important because it shows up many, many places. A simplified, slightly more abstract version of the comma that would then, of course, relate to what the quotes are doing would maybe be cool. Maybe even stencil stuff in here. And this might not seem like a big deal, but it's just kind of like my personal gripe that we always come back to this idea of, B, D, P, Q. And you're not going to see a Q that looks like that, right? We're going to see a Q that looks like that, because that's the way that the hand would write a Q. So the main thing is that we see this kind of bizarre form of symmetry that's like rotational sort of symmetry. This is our main shape. And then if we want to do something that is the opposite of that, it would just be like rotated 180 degrees. So that idea would then carry through here, it would carry through here. That sort of thing just shows up all over the place. The rest of these weights look really good. I don't really feel the need to talk about them a ton because I think the same ideas apply. But what this tells me, Jolana, is that you're really solid at this stuff. I think you know what's going on. Maybe make these daggers a little bit larger or something. But for the most part, it's setting very well. I think it could be tighter since this is probably a display face. But, it kind of works in small sizes. I don't have trouble reading it. And if you're saying, hey, this is like for video games, in the future, I think that's reason enough to go out and be wild. Okay, you have highlighted this, so maybe we should talk about it, whether or not to notch out these little things. For an angle that acute, what is this? Kind of like a 45-degree angle, maybe like a 50-degree angle. I don't think I don't know. It might be a tomato sort of thing. Doesn't really truly matter that much. But then again, for the sake of interpolation, and maybe you're going to do a different optical size of this at some point, and maybe it is really a cool idea to have that built into the point structure. So when the time comes to do these other things, it's already set out for you. But I think my main point is this. You have that idea and you have that idea. How do we get them closer together? I would go all in on the stencil thing because that's what you seem to be enthusiastic about, and I think it's working really, really well. So, Jolana, fantastic work. I love to see it. I hope this critique was helpful for you, and I hope it was maybe helpful for other people as well. So thanks for sending that to me, and I hope everyone has a good day.